Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm back here with my educational video, and we are dealing with the chapter how do organisms reproduce from class 10 NCERT. And if you haven't watched my previous video, please make sure that you'll watch the video and try to understand, because I've explained the concept of reproduction, and I've described the process of asexual reproduction in organisms. Okay, so after understanding those topics only, we will understand the next topic, that is sexual mode of reproduction. So today we will be discussing sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Before you start watching this video, I want you to remember the learning objectives of the video, because if you just watch the video for the sake of watching, then it will be useless, right? So if you know the learning objectives of the video, then you'll watch very carefully, and you will learn the objectives. What are the key points of the video? What are the main lesson you are going to learn from the video? Okay, so for today's video, your learning objectives are: draw the labeled diagram of a flower and explain its various parts, and explain briefly the steps of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay, so first let's see the introduction. Okay, so as we all know that sexual reproduction involves the fusion of gametes. Okay, if you remember the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction, so in asexual mode of reproduction there is no involvement of gametes, but in sexual reproduction there is involvement of gametes, male gametes and female gametes. So likewise in sexual reproduction in plants also, there is a fusion of gametes, two gametes, male gametes or sperm cell, which is formed in pollen grains, and female gamete, which is also called as egg cell, which is found in ovule. Okay, since we are discussing with the sexual reproduction in flowering plants, let's see some characteristics of flowering plants. Now flowering plants are also called as angiosperms. Okay, the plants which gives flower, okay, those are also called as angiosperm. There are many groups of plants. Okay, some plants which do not give flower, those are also called as gymnosperms, pteridophytes, other plants. Okay, so the flowering plants are called as angiosperms. So these angiosperms are the most successful and the most advanced group of plants. Okay, and the reproductive structures are found in flowers. Okay, so since flowers are the reproductive part of the plant, so all the reproductive structures are found within a flower, and seeds are enclosed within a fruit while developing. Okay, so this is one of the important characteristics of angiosperm. The seeds which are produced after fertilization are enclosed within a fruit. If you see the seeds in gymnosperm, so seeds are naked. There is no fruits, or there is no formation of fruits. Seeds are just naked, just exposed in the air. Okay, but in angiosperms, seeds are enclosed within a fruit. Okay, so sexual reproduction in flowering plant happens in two steps, that is pollination and fertilization. So these are the two important steps you need to remember uh, in in the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants: pollination and fertilization. And these processes are followed by seed or fruit formation and germination. Okay, so before we go to the process of reproduction, let's try to understand a flower and its different parts. Okay, so here you can see a simple structure of flower. So flower consists of many structures. Okay, flower consists of one male part, which is called a stamen. Okay, stamen. This stamen is male part, and stamen consists of anther and filament. Okay, this is anther and this is filament. Okay, so anther produces pollen grains, and inside the pollen grains you will find male gametes. So male gametes are produced in the pollen grains, which is found in anther. Okay, and filament is a stalk that supports anther. So there is female part, which is called as pistil or carpel, so which is consist of three different parts, that is stigma, style and ovary. So stigma is the top part where pollen grain lens during pollination. Style is the middle part which connects the stigma and ovary, and ovary is the basal part where you will find ovule and female gamete. Okay, so these two structures are the main structures of a flower, that is male reproductive part and female reproductive part. So other than these parts, there are other parts. This colored structure, this colored leaf-like structure is called as petal, and you already know the function of petal. Okay, petals are mostly brightly colored. So, and the reason is to attract the insects for pollination, right? Sepals, sepals are green leafy part. Okay, and the function of sepals are to protect the flower in bud states, because when flowers are in bud states, sepals will cover the other parts of the flower. So sepals protects the flower in bud states. Okay, and you have receptacle. Receptacle is the basal part from where different parts of the flower will rise. Okay, and peduncle is the stalk of the flower. So you can go through this notes for more information about the parts of the flower, and you also go through this notes. Okay, where you have some more details about the functions of the different parts of the flower. So now let's try to understand different types of flower. Okay, so plants produces two different types of flower. Okay, that is either unisexual or bisexual. Now let's try to understand what are those. So bisexual flower means flower having two different reproductive parts in the same flower. Okay, that is male reproductive part and female reproductive part of a flower. They are present in a same flower. That is bisexual flower having two sex organs. Okay, this is stamen male part, and this is uh, carpel or pistil female part. So these two different reproductive structures are present within a single flower, that is called as bisexual flower. And now unisexual flower means having either male or female part of a flower. Okay, so flower consisting of only either male reproductive part or female reproductive part. So if flower consists of only male reproductive part, then it is called as staminate unisexual flower. Okay, staminate because only stamens are present. And a flower if consists of only female reproductive part, that is carpel or pistil, it is called as pistillate unisexual flower. Okay, so you can see in this flower you cannot see uh, male reproductive part, that is stamens. You can only see female reproductive part, that is carpel. Okay, so there are two different types of flower, that is bisexual where both types of reproductive structures are present, and unisexual flower where only one type of reproductive structures are present. Okay, so here you can see the examples of different plants having unisexual and bisexual flower. Okay, so the corn flower, papaya and cucumber, they have unisexual flower, and mustard, rose and petunia, they have bisexual flowers. Okay, now let's see the first step of sexual reproduction in flowering plants, that is pollination. Okay, so pollination means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a flower with the help of an agent, which are also called as pollinators like wind, insect, water and animals. So you can see this diagram. So pollen grains which is produced in the anther is transferred by pollinator to the stigma. So this process is called as pollination. Okay, so now let's see the different types of pollination. So basically there are three different types of pollination, that is self pollination, cross pollination and artificial pollination. Okay, so in self pollination there is a transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of a same flower or in a different flower of a same plant. Okay, here you can in self pollination there are again two different type. Okay, in type A you can see the transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of a same flower. Okay, this is type A. And in type B there is a transfer of pollen grain from one flower to the stigma of another flower of a same plant. Okay, you have to remember two different flower but of a same plant. So this is called a self-pollination. But in a cross-pollination, there is a transfer of pollen grain from anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of a different plant. Okay, two different plants, but of same species. You have to remember there will be the transfer of pollen grains within two different plants of same species. This is cross pollination. Okay, and in artificial pollination, you will manually take out the pollen grain from one flower and you will put that pollen grains in the stigma of another flower manually. And artificial pollination can be self pollination or cross pollination. Okay, so after the pollination, we have fertilization. So pollination is process where you bring the male and female gamete together. Okay, because if fertilization has to take place, then male and female gamete has to be together, right? So after the pollination, what happens? So pollen grains, after landing in the stigma, now forms a pollen tube. Okay, this long tube like structure is called pollen tube. Okay, and this pollen tube consists of male gametes. So on tip of the pollen tube you'll see male gametes. So these are male gametes, and this pollen tube goes towards the ovary and enters the ovule. So this is the ovule, and pollen tube goes towards the ovule. So after entering the ovule, male gamete is released, and inside the ovule there is egg cell, which is female gamete. It will fertilize. Okay, so fertilization is basically the fusion of male gametes and female gametes. So after male gametes are released in the ovule, these male gametes will move towards the egg cell and the fertilization occur. Okay, so after the fertilization, zygote is formed. Okay, so there are many changes that takes place after the fertilization. So after the fertilization, zygote is formed, and zygote will start dividing and slowly transform into embryo. Okay, and this ovule will transform into seed, and the ovary, this bulging part, this ovary will transform into a fruit. Okay, and the other parts of the flower, that is petals and sepals, they will die and fall off. Okay, so this is how fertilization happens in flowering plants. So now here you can see a flow chart of the whole process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So first we know pollination. Okay, where pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of a flower, of either same flower or different flower. Okay, so the process of pollination is just to bring the male and female gamete together. So after pollination, there is fertilization, which is the fusion of male and female gametes. So in fertilization process, there is a formation of pollen tube, and pollen tube consists of male gamete, and it goes towards the ovule where female gamete is present. So after male gametes are released in the ovule, there is fertilization process, and the fertilization process result in the formation of zygote. Zygote slowly develop into embryo, and an embryo gets attached in the seeds. Okay, embryo gets attached in the seeds, so you have to remember that. Okay, an ovule will slowly develop into seeds, and the ovary will develop into fruits. Other parts of the flower will die and fall off. Now once the seed is dispersed, okay, once the seed is dispersed, it will germinate. Okay, when it gets the moisture soil, it will germinate, and the germination is basically from the part called as embryo. So since the embryo is attached in the seed, from the embryo, roots and shoots will develop, and new plant is formed, and again this plant will bear flower after some time, and again the cycle continues. Okay, so this is the whole process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay, so now I hope you are clear with these topics. Now I want you to do this small work. So you need to draw this flower, okay, and identify and write the different parts of the flower in the boxes. Okay, what are the different parts of the flower? You need to draw this diagram in the notebook, label the parts, and also explain the function of different parts of the flower. Okay, so this is all about sexual reproduction in flowering plant. So in next video, we will be discussing about the sexual reproduction in animals. Okay, thank you very much for watching this video. Please like, subscribe and share.